you were to rob a bank, the average haul these days is about $3,700. If you rob a 7-Eleven, the haul is somewhere around $348 plus an unlimited Slurpee. Your chances of getting caught are very high at the 7-Eleven, very high at the bank, and infinitesimally small in cyber. So when you follow the money, you can see what we're all up against. And fortunately for the FBI and the government partnerships, we have some resources. So let me introduce the panelists. You have their background in front of you on the table, so keep that with you afterwards if you want. Let me start with a question, Jonathan, from Van Deventer Black Woods Rogers. Woods Rogers Van Deventer Black. You're a cyber counsel?
Yes.
Have you had clients recently who have suffered a cyber incident?
Absolutely. We see ransomware events, we see business email compromises, wire transfer fraud cases. I think we've had 4 ransomware incidents, or 5 so far this year we've dealt with.
And what's the average dollar cost to a business?
You mean the request for ransom?
Yeah, the request for ransom.
Demand for ransom? The lowest so far I've seen this year is 1.5 million. The highest was 5 million.
5 million. How long was your client down and unavailable to their systems?
And that's a great question. And I hate to give a lawyer to answer, it depends. It all depends on what the client did to prep themselves for restoration. Sometimes the client was not completely offline. They were able to get critical systems functioning. Other times they were completely offline. And we've had clients come back to general operations in a few days, up to a week or 2. It all depends on whether they've done their homework and whether they've prepared.
So Nicole Kaufman and Knoll, you are also the cyber counsel. Have you had clients that have been right of boom, as we say, had an incident?
We have. We've had a number of you've probably seen, particularly in the news recently, there's been some pretty large credit companies that you can use to help sort of process credit cards, your sort of retail operations and the like. You can just stand out here and look up the waterfront, and there are hundreds of businesses that have been impacted by those in particular recently. Yeah.
So one of Jason's slides focused on prevention, and I believe the term run book. What is a run book?
So what are you going to do when this happens? What's going to be your plan? It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be complicated. It's probably best if it's not complicated, but it needs to walk through A, B, C, and D all through the process. I have been involved in a situation where we were working with clients and said, okay, where's your plan for dealing with this? Well, it's in our electronic files. Well, can you get to your electronic files right now? And there's dead silence on the phone, and the answer is no. So I know a lot of businesses have moved to a much more paperless society, sort of within their environments. This is one piece of paper that you really need to actually keep and put in a file. Yeah.
So in Boston last week, the FBI who was presenting said, if you're trying to figure out who to call after an incident, it's too late. It doesn't have to be Jonathan or Nicole, but if you don't have an attorney on speed dial that you've already prepared with, then it's too late. And it's probably the same with your insurance broker, right?
Yeah. Your attorney, your insurance broker. A lot of people now will sort of go ahead and have, particularly if it's going to be a large breach, you'll have someone who can help you with the PR piece of it. You'll have that sort of information on there. Some people, your insurance carrier is likely going to steer you in certain directions when it comes to various vendors, including sort of who you may be required to use for forensics. But if you're negotiating with your insurance company, you can oftentimes request the counsel that you want to use for your breach, as well as the various vendors' forensics. If you've got a mail notice, they'll mailing companies and the like.
Yeah. And they'll introduce you to the forensics teams or the options or the panel that you can choose from. So Scott, why why is this threat looming to the middle market? Why is the surface so large?
The vulnerability. I work for an organization that we're a $5 billion company. I mean, we have significant assets to protect our network. We train our people. We have huge levels of compliance in terms of what our employees have to go through. I jokingly, the green pieces of paper on your desk or your tables are created by me because I couldn't make a QR code on my laptop in short notice because I can't access Google Forms on my company laptop. My mail is quarantined. So yes, do we have a lot of proprietary data? Absolutely. Are we a target? Yes. But we're a lot harder to penetrate than most of the small to mid-sized businesses in this room.
Larry, one of the things that Jason talked about was backups are the first thing that get targeted. So are backups a waste of time and money these days?
No, absolutely not. You can't have enough backups. The bigger issue is you want to have as many backups as you can, local and off-site. There's a thing called immutable backups. Immutable backups can't be changed. They can't even be deleted unless a retention policy is in order. So those are that's your ace in the hole. When you get to the point of where you're going off-site to get your backups, your downtime obviously is going to be extended because you're rebuilding from scratch. But quite frankly, depending upon how the network is laid out and how things are designed, segmentation is a good help, but backups will help you recover to that point in time that you need.
And you use the term immutable.
Immutable.
And we sometimes use the term air gap.
Air gap.
How do those work together?
Well, air gap is they're not even, you cannot get from one point to the next. There's no physical connection. Immutable meaning it's not able to be changed. So an immutable backup in the cloud can't be encrypted, can't be touched, can't be changed, can't be deleted. There's policies in place. So even if they got to that point without your keys and other information, that would never happen.
So Gabriel, one of the things in the presentation talked about artificial intelligence. And I'm convinced my GPA would have been 4.0 if it had existed for my term papers were I younger.
Yep.
So how can AI both help and hurt in the security realm?
So show of hands, who's heard of ChatGPT? Okay. Who knows what it stands for? One. Right, so ChatGPT was actually built out of Google per se. What it is, it's a generative pre-trained transform. And what they did is when they were starting to do Google Translate, they said, okay, let's go look at natural language and see how words relate to each other. When there's a to, when there's a the, when there's a this, when there's a that. So they built these pre-trained models to go ahead and understand natural language, which was fantastic, right? So, 4.0, your kids in high school, 4.0. So it was just this interface that came about because of the fact that Google was doing so much work on how to translate from, Mandarin to English, or French to English, or Spanish to French. So as these related models came in, someone had the idea, OpenAI was like, well, what happens if we train this on known conversations? And we start asking it questions. And we start saying, hey, ChatGPT, can you finish my goals for the year as a chief information security officer, right? Tell me what I'm supposed to be doing. What are my goals for the year? And it'll list out a 5-point goal of what a typical CISO should be doing over the course of the year to be successful.
How'd you stack up?
Well, we're only in June, so we'll see. So what happens is that we use this technology, we use AI, and we're using the language that we've spoken to everyone else in order to harness feedback or information back to us. Well, that's awesome. But the dark side of that is that now threat actors can use the same intelligence, the same natural language to go ahead and attack you or us or your business, right? So let's say I'm a threat actor from North Korea or Iran, and for a national, I don't speak English natively, and I say, okay, Jason, what I want ChatGPT to do is go out, find all his connections on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Obviously he's been searching for Taylor Swift tickets. So we're going to go in and take all the compromised data that's happened across all of the hacks. You know, we talk about PCI that was hacked, or, you know, that Nicole talked about. We talk about Equifax. We talk about Target. I mean, it goes on and on and on. You know, Pilgrim Health. And what it's going to do is I can say, hey, ChatGPT, go ahead and create 3 spear phishing campaigns directly at Jason. Give me the 3 best things that are going to work based on his personality, his semantics, what he's interested in, what his family's like, and go ahead and now attack him. Okay? So this is where we've gotten. Now, you know, generally sometimes when we look at phishing emails, you look at, like, you know, the wording is not good when you read it, and you're like, oh, this is a phishing attempt because, you know, it doesn't make sense. You know, they're not using the right words. But now they have a natural language translation with the research engine behind it to literally build those campaigns, and all they do is copy paste.
All right, so
Right.
this is when you scare everyone.
Right. So phase 2 of that is now ChatGPT can actually take over the interaction conversations that I have through an email as I'm attacking Jason. So I don't even need to participate necessarily in this conversation, just to know that the model itself, ChatGPT, knows that we need to spearfish Jason, and I need to get credentials of some sort to his accounts. And it just keeps going, going. And now multiply this across everybody else, multiply by the industry. You know, this is a big change in the environment that we see as these new natural language models actually get out there and start being used by threat actors.
So, Nicole, it's a changing landscape. How does this impact you as an attorney, and how does this impact your relationship with a client and their preparation?
I don't think the preparation actually ever stops. I think it evolves over time. One of the things I've noticed really recently, I think this is a good example, particularly we've seen some of these PCI breaches recently, is talking to clients. Okay, do you have your contract with this company that was your third-party vendor? Well, I don't know. Well, let's see if we can find it. Several days later, it's 12 or 15 years old. That's the last thing they've signed. That's one of the key things is, and sort of this goes to the evolution, you really have to be sort of continually monitoring that, and you have to be looking at your third-party vendors. You have to be updating your contracts, because in a lot of cases, there's some remedy that you may be able to get from your vendor, but certainly not if your contract is 12 years old.
Does your CEO now need to be more technical than they used to be?
Not necessarily any more technical. They need to be sort of more knowledgeable, and I think that's the key. Is this has to be, and Jason mentioned this. This really has to be a top-down approach. If you don't have your C-suite, the heads of your companies buying into this, your risk, I think, is significantly greater.
Jonathan, what's your view of that? Does an organization need to think of themselves as a technical organization, a software firm inside every company?
I don't think they need to think of themselves as that, every single company, but they need to have the right people available who keep track of these things. As Nicole said, I mean, I've seen cases where we've had clients have their data breached by the third-party vendor, and they're scrambling to figure out, do we have some remedy under our contractual agreement with this particular vendor? But I think companies do need to be aware, and as Jason said, it has to come from the top down, but you need to identify these key stakeholders in your company as well, that, you know, if something goes wrong and something occurs, you know who to talk to, and that can be, you know, part of your incident response plan, and who has these delineated responsibilities to keep track of things.
So Jason talked about MFA, multi-factor or two-factor authentication. Can a business leader enforce that in an organization? Can you have your employees obligated to use that?
Sure.
So there's no prohibition.
Oh, you should have them. You should have them do it. I can't tell you how many incidents I've seen. They don't enforce MFA, and they get hacked through their email system or through some other system. No, it should be enforced. The MFA should be enforced in the organization.
And the trade-off is disgruntled employees who have to put in their some sort of two different keys to get in, versus your business losing millions of dollars over a couple of days when you were totally offline? You have a choice.
It's like dealing with teenagers.
And employees can get what's called MFA fatigue. So as Jason was saying, it's got to be the right MFA. It's got to be something that's interactive. I mean, many times people will just ignore they'll get the phone call or something. They'll say, all right, just stop bothering me and hit. They don't even see the phone. They just tap it, and they've gotten access. It has to be really better than just that.
So Larry, you've got experience with a client that had verbal authentic. Can you explain what that is, verbal versus digital?
I mean, the MFA was set up to make a phone call to approve this action. She was heading out of town. She went to the airport, trying to get to her an ill parent, and she got called 3 times and cleared it. 4th time, she said, "Okay, just stop it." And at that point, they're in. And I mean,
So that's
now it becomes become from being proactive now reactive.
So it's MFAT, MFA fatigue.
Absolutely.
When Jason talked about zero trust, what is zero trust as a technologist? What does that mean?
For us, it's like it is definitely if you look at your technology stack or your security stack, a lot of the tools are reactive. Something has to happen, and a tripwire's tripped. It sees a signature, it sees something, and then it goes into action. Zero trust is the exact 100% opposite. If we haven't seen it, if we haven't cataloged it, it's not going to run. That's it, plain and simple. Zero trust is we don't trust anything that we don't know. If you want to install that software, we need to catalog it first. Once it's cataloged, we won't have a problem.
But might that also frustrate the employee if they're trying to run something they've run before?
It's a huge culture change. It really is, and all of this affects the cultural landscape in a company. I mean, just thinking about two-factor, where you have, and we were dealing with this in Rhode Island, when you have like a union involved, and the union it stipulates that you can't force a user to use multi-factor on their own phone. You either have to provide them with a token or with a phone. So there's different things. It's a massive culture change.
So there's a workaround.
There's
It's
always a workaround.
It's just money.
Right, it is. You can, but you.
And it's less than what Jonathan said the average $1-point-something million request is?
Absolutely. It's that, pound of cure, ounce of prevention, pound of cure, So, I mean, it really is, and this does, it starts at the top. The CEO, the executive team has to trickle this down and be insistent about it. But as your technology providers, we can come up with, elegant solutions that help cover you and meet the requirements of your staff.
So Scott, educating our employees, our coworkers, is that something that you think of as optional or mandatory these days?
It's mandatory, 100%. So when we're consulting with small and mid-sized businesses, we're saying, look, you've got to have initial compliance training, annual compliance training. You've got to have monthly or quarterly updates on what the potential threats are. And then back to the points of, I think, first and foremost, if phishing is your number one attack, then your greatest exposure is your people. So you're educating your people on what it is that they need to not do, and then educate them on what the trust level should be to then report themselves if they make a mistake. Because they are humans and they're going to make mistakes. And these are getting more sophisticated. The cleanliness, the look and feel of a phishing campaign is very different than it was even 3 years ago. And so I think building that trust with your employees, like, hey, we don't want you to do these things, but if something happens, you need to let us know immediately, is pretty key.
Nicole, have you had clients where an incident occurred and there was a period of time before the employee reported it up the food chain?
Certainly. And I think employees, for the most part, are well-meaning individuals. They don't certainly, and it's not every case, but they don't intend to cause their employers a significant amount of harm. So I think a lot of times what you find is employees are like, oh, I can't believe I've just done this, or they were just moving too quickly where they weren't paying attention and didn't realize it, and when they went back to check something around sort of a second time, sort of they've discovered it. And a lot of times that gap significantly impacts Jason and his team's ability to help you. Because if you're able to report, particularly on a business email compromise where there's been some sort of large wire or either a series of smaller wires, because we've seen those as well, that have gone out over a period of time, what you need to do is report that as quickly as possible, because once you get past a certain window of time, the FBI, although they would love to be able to help you, are not likely to be able to pull that money back.
Because too much time has passed. So, Jonathan, have you seen similar things with clients?
Absolutely, and sometimes the clients, that the employees don't even know that it's occurred. I mean, sometimes you'll get an example of an employee, their payroll direct deposit information has changed, and they didn't even know it, and they don't find out until a paycheck or two later, and then they report it, and by then it's 15 days or 30 days have gone by, but you definitely see that as well.
Do you now advise clients any differently on wire transfer protocol than maybe 10 or 15 years ago?
Absolutely, we do. I mean, we do it differently even in our own firm now. And most banks have changed their protocol, so now you're generally following the bank's lead. But so if, for example, if we're wiring out funds on a transaction, we can't wire out unless we've physically spoken with someone and actually confirmed the wire transfer instructions, and that's what we recommend to our clients. And now a lot of banks require you to come in order to even initiate a wire transfer. So,
Gabriel, when we think about cyber information security officer, the role, whatever ChatGPT says you're supposed to be doing, is there still a role for old-fashioned technology like a firewall, like a switch? And then how does newer technology that we all demand, like a wireless access point, how does that add complexity or remove complexity?
Right. The nice thing about AI is that a lot of this technology is being commoditized. So we're seeing a lot more inclusion of AI type systems in commodity class networking hardware, firewalls, access points. They're leveraging what processing power they have on the edge to try to help us out as much as we can in fighting this malware. So they come with their own signatures. They come with their own behavioral intelligence. Everyone has started to mix in their own special sauce on what they can detect and how capable they are in order to help the business more. So when you're buying a product, you're also getting the premium that they've invested into the software to make you more secure. So it helps.
So, Larry, in our part of 757, Hampton Roads, we've got a lot of organizations that work in the DoD food chain. And what we've seen is compliance being a recommendation now is a requirement. How does that help a small business that they're forced into some compliance role they didn't used to have to do?
Well, I think initially they see it as hurt to them because it's expensive to be compliant. It really is. It's another layer of having to do something in order to get a contract or stay on the contract. It's another expense item. The problem is now, and I made this point at the last one we did, the threat actors are, if you look at them like commercial fishermen, a commercial fishing boat doesn't just pull up and throw a line over and hope it catches a fish. It casts a wide net. So, and you heard this from Jason, everyone is vulnerable. So you can't not pursue this. So compliance, the DoD requiring compliance, it's another thing you have to build into your business model. And so it is a good thing. In the end, it keeps them operating. The other piece that I think that a lot of people forget about or don't really consider is if you are breached, if you are hacked, if your business does go down, you've got 5, 10, 50, 100 people that don't know where the next paycheck's coming from. The emotional toll, you're dealing with it in the trenches. You can avoid all of this. And it's a lot cheaper to avoid it than it is to deal with it if it hits you in the face and take roll the dice.
Nicole, from an emotional standpoint that Larry talks about, you've had clients who have suffered an incident. What did that do to them and emotionally to them as individuals?
It's challenging, particularly sort of you see this still happen. W-2, sort of that compromise that happens usually in the, March, April, sometimes February timeframe, although it can really happen at any time of year. You have an employer who's disclosed all of their employees' information. And it's very difficult, I think, at that point in time to separate the emotion from the steps that you need to go through to mitigate the damage. And I think that's where you see clients in particular want to act absolutely immediately, and you really have to work hard to almost bring them off the ledge and say, we have to push the brakes on here, because there's a whole bunch of steps that we need to walk through before you come out and be public with this breach, let other people know that's happened, because particularly if you've got something very large, and you do have to make that known publicly. The last thing that you want to do is give misinformation the first time, because then you're coming back and having to correct that.
And
Second time around.
so when these things happen, we've talked about the employee that might push a button, but now it's the C-suite, now it's the leadership. And so they have to carry this emotional burden until the time is right for the information to be shared. John, have you had similar client experiences?
Oh, sure. Well, we represent a lot of different verticals, both public and private entities, and certainly the C-suite or the board, when something's going on. But like Nicole said, the on-the-ground employees get very stressed as well, because they know something's going on. When they're told, well, you're not allowed to use your computer now. We're going to do payroll by hand now. So they know something's up. And then you get the questions, and who do you tell? And then the other thing is, if you don't have a managed service provider and you're a company that's your own IT group and you get hit by ransomware, well, I tell you, these things hit usually on the weekends. They hit over the holidays. And we're on the phone as breach counsel 15 hours a day, 20 hours a day, talking to the different parties. And then you have the IT team who's working at 3, 4, 5 in the morning to try to restore the network so the company can get up and running. And it does take its toll on the employees. They get very upset. We've had cases where employees got sick because they couldn't, because of the stress was so ongoing and for so long. So yeah, that's a definite concern.
So the emotional toll equal to the financial toll. So Gabe, what are the things that can be in the run book, and where should the run book be to maybe help avoid that toll?
All right. I know everybody in here has had a printing problem, right? Call your managed service provider, get your printing fixed, because you need to print your business continuity disaster recovery report plan. You have to. Take it home. Leave it in a safety deposit box. You have to have it. It should have every single account number that you are associated with. It should have every single vendor that you're dealing with. It should have every single emergency contact. We're talking FBI, state, local, fire. Everyone that you could possibly imagine. If you had to start your organization over, maybe a year, it's only a year old, 5 years, 30, 50, legacy corporation, you need to have that in your hands, because you're not going to have anything left that you can reliably look at. It may have been changed, it may have been encrypted, you have no idea. So get your printer fixed, print it out, and then take it somewhere safe. Somewhere where you would, the only place, if you have a sanctuary place, take it there. Right, a summer home, take it there. Just make sure you have a separate copy and update it.
Yeah. If it's 15 years old, it's worthless. Larry, this is Back to the Future, right? Because in 1988, we were all told, don't write anything down and leave it on your desk, because the security concern was the cleaning crew, that they were going to use your dial code and maybe call their friends in Europe. And now we're being told to print things. So isn't that diametrically opposed?
I don't think so. I think, if you don't cover your 6, who's going to? And again, I think Gabe's point is really clear in the fact that, and Jason made this, it's not about if, it's about when. If you're not prepared, that's the first strike. If you don't expect something to happen, you are not going to be prepared, and then this whole thing snowballs so quickly. And again, talking your clients off the ledge, making the way that the information is released. It's incredible. So this is one important piece that you have to have. So sure, you could have it in a safe deposit box on a thumb drive, but do you have a computer that you're going to be able to rely on when, you know, the hack happens? Probably not. Everything's going to be sequestered. Everything's going to be regenerated, right? So you can't rely on that. Paper is not always bad.
So Scott, how do you foster an environment? How does a leader foster an environment in which we can empower and inspire our team to do the right thing at the same time we're trying to build guardrails to keep everybody safe? How do you foster that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with just building that trust with your employees. I mean, helping them understand what the real risk to the business is. And we've talked a lot about the risk to the business owner and the employees, but what about the liabilities of the business against their customers, the data that they have from outside their organization? That gets exponentially larger. And so when you're sharing with them, like, sort of the reasons behind this, it's the crux of it is, like, you're protecting not just yourself and others around you, your teammates, but your clients, your vendors, et cetera. And so I think that that's sort of where you have to start, and just instill in them that, yes, there are going to be inconveniences. I think that's the common thing that we've been hearing is MFA is a pain in the butt, or changing your password every 30 days and I got to come up with a new password. Look, I get irritated by that, but I understand the need and the reason and the logic behind it, and the potential risk if we don't do it well.
So we had promised everyone that this would be a scary presentation, and Jason scared us all. Jonathan, is there any reason to be hopeful?
Well, I think ransomware and threats are here to stay, just like Jason said. But I think if you prepare, I mean, you can never prepare enough. It's not if, it's when, as Jason says, and everybody here on this panel knows that. But I think you can not be groping around in the dark wondering, what am I going to do? And one thing I do want to mention about the run book, having in your run book, and I see this all the time, please have a network diagram and an asset inventory of your system. I can't say how many times in an event where we brought in the restoration team and the forensic team, and they say, okay, how many endpoints do you have? What servers are you running? I don't know. I think I have 10. I think I have 30. I don't know. Are they virtual or not? I'm not sure. Please put in your run book a network diagram and an asset inventory so that when something occurs and the resources come in, they know how to best help you and they're not traveling all over the place trying to figure out what your network looks like. So I think, yeah, there's reason to be hopeful if you're prepared. Yeah. And you can make your downtime not 3 weeks or a month, but maybe a few days.
Nicole, is there a reason to be hopeful? Other than what we hear is there's honor amongst thieves, so if you did pay $1 million, you might get your data back. What, is there any more hope than that from your view?
No, I think there is. If you're proactive about it, I agree with what's been said. If you're proactive about it and you've anticipated it, you're prepared, your team is ready, and you've been through those steps. And it's not just having sort of the run book, it's putting it into practice when it's not sort of the dire need situation and at the critical moment. Go through that. Have a tabletop exercise. There are people sort of that will facilitate those, for you. So yeah. I think there is.
I know ACG 757 is middle market and finance and mergers and acquisitions. Are you guys seeing this topic become part of the diligence in a merger or an acquisition?
Absolutely. Almost every deal now, if you get a due diligence request, it will have a whole list of questions that you need to respond to with documents. People are asking for your disaster recovery plan. And then in actual, the purchase agreement themselves will be a whole lot of reps and warranties about sort of your history in this regard, your current systems, your practices in terms of privacy, security, right down to if you have a privacy policy on your website, is it updated and are you actually following it? So those can be, I think, pretty broad.
And are those carved out of any tail coverage insurance, or is that part of the conversation as well?
Usually part of the conversation. Now, if you have If you have rep and warranty insurance on a deal, sometimes there can be some negotiation with respect to that. You know, the rep and warranty insurance a lot of times will have very specific carve-outs that they're just not going to cover.
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. I know Jess is giving me the signal. We've got time for Q&A, Jess? Yes.
Is there a set of circumstances where any one of you would recommend the payment of a ransom depending on return on investment?
Well, we.
Are you the ransomer?
Well, I'll speak briefly to that. So, you know, we advise clients generally not to pay their ransom, just like the FBI, but there are certain circumstances in which a business may pay the ransom, and it generally falls into two reasons. One, they're completely encrypted and they can't get anything back. Two, their information is so sensitive, they're afraid it's going to go out on the dark web and they'll be embarrassed. Now, I know honor among thieves, right? They're supposedly not going to post your information and they supposedly have not already sold it or used it somewhere else. The other thing you got to think about, though, is if as a business you're considering paying ransom, you have to worry about Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC. It's against the law to pay a foreign actor who's on that list. So Jason talked earlier about attribution. So you would really need to engage an expert in that to determine whether or not the entity that you're considering paying is on that OFAC list, because it's prohibited by federal law. And as a matter of fact, some states now are passing laws prohibiting the payment of ransom. So that's another consideration you have to have.
And I wholeheartedly agree with that. We've seen clients, because of the sensitivity of the data that they had, were ready to pay. And thankfully, someone stepped in and said, let's check the OFAC list before you do that. And what they were able to determine, sort of in conjunction with the FBI who was helping them and the other sort of professionals on the team, was this in fact was an entity that was on that OFAC list. I don't think you want to pay, then you've almost been hit twice. You've had the ransomware, you've lost a whole bunch of money that you had to pay out. Now you got now Jason, who has been working with you, is going to send one of his friends to talk to you about sort of the violation of paying the, yeah.
Yes.
So, two questions really. How bad is it for your employees to be on TikTok, which is a popular thing, and have that unsecureness? And then secondly, when people are transferring money through Venmo and Zelle, how bad is that?
Yeah, so TikTok, a lot of the larger organizations are removing access or writing company policies to stop access to TikTok. Just because of, you know, the fact that it is owned by a Chinese national company. There is data security issues around that. We don't know if the Chinese government has direct access to it, and then also what's posted on it. There could be, part of the, open source information security parameters is literally going like. So I was on an OSINT training session where we were asked to try to get into JP Morgan Chase. This is theoretical. So we started looking. We're like, okay, first day at JP Morgan Chase, right? We went to TikTok, and you'd see interns walking around with their phones, mapping the inside, showing pictures of their computers. So this is public. This is for everyone. It's very easy to pick up that type of information based off of tools, not only TikTok, but Instagram and all the other stuff that all the Zs are using now.
So can you pull the thread and talk about, can you ban that? And if so, how? Is it an acceptable use policy? Is it a WISP?
Yeah, it's an acceptable use policy because you have to, I'll defer to the lawyers here, but there is, the business, when, it's an agreement, right, between the employee and the employer saying, hey, you're going to do what you're supposed to do and be good about it and in good faith. And you can say that, hey, social media access is not allowed in our organization. You can't post anything about the business, around the business. And it's just, you'll see it baked in, correct? Mm-hmm. A lot of these agreements. Yeah. So it is enforceable.
What about my marketing friends that are going to put this on LinkedIn? Can we ban that? Do we need to ban that?
Well, there's operational access. When you look at policies and procedures, especially from a security governance standpoint, there should be controls of authorization for content, right? So you'll see a data classification that says public access. And that is, it's signed off by a business leader to say, hey, when we post stuff to LinkedIn as our entity, we need these people to sign off on whether this is the correct message. And that's part of the security culture that's in the organization, is having that governance that says, hey, what can be posted, who should be posting, and how relevant is that content to our core business.
First day at TikTok at JP Morgan, that's an instant negative.
Oh my, yeah, it's awful.
Any other questions? Yes.
So 2 questions. First one is, what about like access card type security stuff? I know that's not like quite in the cyber realm, but it seems like it would add an additional layer of security. Or something like, VPN just for the company or something like that. Like how would those type of things maybe work better than some of the traditional stuff that's out there? It seems to me that the more local you would like make the network or the accessibility, the less likely it is from our outside source to kind of get in that. And then the other question is, we've talked a lot about security and everything like that, and the conversation is always like more security is better. But I think at some point in time you got to look at it like the speed limit, right? Like I'm sure it's much safer to drive at 35 miles an hour versus 70. But obviously there's 70 mile per hour speed limits on the interstate because you kind of like compromise safety for like, time saving, convenience, or maybe just the bottom line is impacted so much that it's like, it becomes either a conversation on how much is this worth, like will we lose more money by being this secure, losing this many man hours, so on and so forth. So I was just kind of curious about your opinion on both of those things.
Is that directed to me? Because I'd love to answer those
Whoever.
questions. Like I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah. Whoever. I was
one or
trying to look
two,
at all of
you
you
know.
all at the same time, but I only have 2 eyes. So.
I'll do
questions.
hardware security. So
Okay.
YubiKeys, and application-based authorization. So there's a thing about repudiation. Like how do you believe who's on the other end? And the hardware keys, the YubiKeys, or a physical access key that you actually slide in your card, none of the security stays with the vendor that you're accessing, right? So you actually create the security key on your device, your local device. So what you do is you create a private and a public key, and you keep the private key and you send the public key out to the vendor. They sign it saying, oh yes, we've authorized that this is you, blah, 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 and they send it back. And when you read that with your own private key, you can get into the system. Like you're saying, yes, I am who I say I am because I hold the key of my identity. So that's where hardware-based authentication is a step above all of the other, MFA, SMS keys, voice dial, because you are your identity in one of yourself. So if you can do a hardware key, YubiKey, like that's it. I have one. I carry it around with me constantly. Fits into the USB drive on my phone, and anytime I get a prompt for a site, I just authorize that it's me and keep moving on, right? So it's touch.
So the other question is, when is too much software, or too much security, Larry, too much security?
You can't have enough.
Well, you say that, but if I change the speed limit to 264 right now to 30 miles an hour, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't be happy about that. You'd be safer. You know what I'm saying?
I get it. And
Yeah.
this goes back to the culture. I mean, the culture, the landscape in your company is changing, and it's changing incrementally.
Mm-hmm.
It's often not pretty.
Yeah.
It's because, and especially in older established companies, that we never did it that way. You hear that, well, we didn't used to do it that way, but you have to do it that way now. And that's a real tough pill to swallow.
Yeah.
But this is the thing that the IT professionals really can't, we don't, we could give you all the language, but it really has to come from the top down. We're doing this to protect ourselves, our company, our livelihoods, and we know this is going to be an inconvenience, but as you do it more, you'll get used to it.
Well, and I would agree with that, but let's just say that at some point in time, we had the internet and you just had to log in. Then it's 2-factor authentication, right? Well, as the other side gets smarter and better and faster, what if it takes you 2 hours before you can access that system because of the security authentication? Like, at some point, I know this is probably further down the road or it's a hypothetical, but at some point in time, you draw the line somewhere. I mean, what if it took you a day to log in? Like you had to start logging in on Sunday.
The pendulum has really swung the other way now, at this point. Again, I think no security vendor is trying to put things in place to make your life harder.
Yeah.
They're putting things in place to make your networks more secure so you can continue to do what you do. So I think that would be an extreme to see it go that far. But there are processes and protocols, just like you're talking about VPN.
Yep.
VPN takes a second or two for it to connect up because there's a whole bunch of handshakes going on in the back end. There's a whole bunch of exchange of information. And it's not really, it's like a cake. It's a layered cake. You have to put things in top. So on top of it to keep getting where you want to go. So I think I think that we go back to the culture piece. It really is all about incrementally changing the culture and getting everybody on board, because then it makes the pill easier to swallow.
Here's a real simple way to compare it. So you're out there on the highway, cruising along at 60-ish, 54, and you look around you and you see an 82 Datsun that's running on a spare. You see a Mercedes S-Class. You see a dually pickup with a fifth wheel. Everything is out there everything is different. So here's the thing, all right? I'm pretty safe on the road, I guess. I drive a Volvo, okay? But here's the thing, it's old enough that I don't have automatic emergency braking. I don't have any self-driving capabilities in it. Shoot, it doesn't even have blind spots, right? It's got airbags. I mean, I'm not, but I'm one of those. So that's my risk, right? So if I need to feel that I need to protect myself against the Datsun or the dually Ford with the fifth wheel, like I need to scale up, and that's kind of what cyber is. I mean, the money behind it is driving their advancements, right? So we have to do the same thing in order to keep up, but it can't be so painful that I'm going to be stuck. I can't even ride the highway because I can't even do 54 miles an hour. You know what I mean? So if you're going to participate as a business owner, this is just the new normal at this point. Unfortunately, it's where we're at. I like the internet the way it was before when I fired up MindSpring or whatever and got connected, but
That's rough.
Appreciate everybody coming. Thank you. Have a great day.